I want to talk about doctors. Those people who hold the power of life and death in their hands, who in this country are still revered as gods, as special beings, as saint-like saviours. I want to know why, when they cock up, i.e. when people die needlessly, their special status allows their mistakes to be hidden, not just from the world, but from their patients, who have every right to know who's treating them. This week we heard the GP, Joanne Rowe, refused to see a 5-year-old girl with chronic asthma because she was a few minutes late for her appointment. That little girl, let's give her a name, Eddie Mae Clock, died a few hours later. But instead of exposing Rowe's callousness, instead of questioning her right to even be a doctor, she was disciplined in secret, a process designed to help doctors avoid the stress of public exposure. So, a little girl's life is lost, and Joanne Rowe's punishment was a 6-month paid holiday and a 294-word written warning. How can that be? How can a child die needlessly, yet the person who should have helped is allowed to carry on, courtesy of medical bodies who appear to care more about the reputation of doctors than the lives of their patients?
Carole, well, it's such a tragic case, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't read about what happened to this little girl, Eddie Mae Clock, and not be moved.
Yeah.
It's so sad and, every parent's nightmare. But I think that I would be really weary of having a knee-jerk reaction that kind of blames the medical profession for everything that goes wrong in the NHS, because it seems to me like there were problems with this doctor, and, we've seen some of the details of the case. I mean, she routinely dismissed patients who were late, even when they were coming for an emergency appointment. Now, that doesn't sound right to me. But on the other hand, and so not in any way to excuse the actions of this doctor, there are reasons why doctors are so hard about appointments and punctuality. And one of the reasons is that we know they're under tremendous pressure. They have 10 minutes per patient. A report came out recently showing that we have one of the shortest appointment rates in Europe in terms of giving attention to individual patients. There's so much pressure to save time on appointments, to pack as many people in, that you can see how doctors would end up making, in my view, sometimes wrong decisions about whether to see patients or not. And also, just looking at the bigger picture of the medical profession, I think, speaking personally, I don't know a single doctor who became a doctor, especially GP, other than because they wanted to help people.
My biggest beef about this doctor was disciplined in secret. We would never have got to know about
just before
this.
we bring everyone else in, can I just say, I think that you're conflating a lot of different issues here. One is what happened with this doctor, and I've said I agree with you.
Well,
it seems to me that was a bad decision, and she has been disciplined. There's another issue about whether that should be done transparently in public, which I personally think it should be. And then there's another issue about the general conditions that doctors are working in and the kind of pressures that they're under. And I mean, I don't know if that's what you want to talk about. Right?
I mean, obviously it's a tragic case. There's no doubt about that. I look at it from my own experience and coaching young players. When a group of young players come to me for the first time, I am obliged to find out if there's any medical history with any of those young players. And if they turn up and they don't have their medication, in this case asthma medication, I won't let them train with me. It's my safeguarding responsibility not to let a child put himself or herself in a position where they could have an asthma attack. And we know asthma attacks are treated as life-threatening conditions. What concerns me is I think the system throughout this, even before she got to the hospital, to the doctors, I should say, I would say, how do you put in place the fact that this girl has got a medical history, and what are the interventions that are put in place to sort of make sure that she doesn't end up in a serious medical condition? And I think that the culture in the doctors clearly failed her. Yeah. Absolutely. But I do think we have to also understand that there should be processes in place that doesn't happen. And part of that is even the receptionist on the doctor's surgery, the culture within that in that doctor's surgery. If people don't feel comfortable going and talking to the doctor because of whatever reason, because of barriers, then again you're failing the patient. So I think it's a combination of things that led to this tragedy. But equally, I do think we have to also get a balance between punishing the medical profession for situations that aren't solely their responsibility.
But this was a little girl who'd been sent home from school sick, who got in there. She was a few minutes late. No decent doctor sends away. Let me just tell you what the GMC said in their written warning to her. They said, your failure to see and assess this child does not meet with the standards required of a doctor. It risks bringing the profession to disrepute and must not be repeated. And it says, whilst this failing in itself is not so serious as to require any restriction on your registration, it's necessary in response to issue this formal warning. What can be more serious than a 5-year-old child dying? There can be nothing more serious. And in terms of punishment...
Carole, have you ever made a mistake?
Yes, but my job isn't about life or death. My job isn't about life or death.
But you make mistakes.
No one mistakes.
You've made mistakes.
Of course I have.
We've all made mistakes. We're lucky. We don't work in an area where someone could die because of that. But if you think every time a doctor makes a mistake, and doctors will make mistakes, they should be hung out to dry publicly.
Exactly.
I think you're wrong.
But this was a mistake. This was a decision she made. She shouted through the surgery, she's late, I'm not going to see her.
But it's still...
That's not a mistake.
It is a mistake.
It's a decision she made.
It's a part of the culture. Unfortunately, it's part of the culture of that practice. Obviously, I don't know the practice, so I'm assuming that's the case.
No.
To Greg's point, we have to make sure we create a culture where we learn from mistakes, a bit like the airline industry, where they have a more open culture to mistakes so that they learn from them very quickly, because they know if planes fall out the sky for whatever reason, that's not good for business. Okay, we've got to adopt the same culture within our health service, where people who are dealing with very difficult situations can be reviewed. Sorry, let me finish. Can be reviewed to make sure that everything that they did in their power to keep that, to do the right thing, was done. And then you have to say, we understand and we learn from it and we move on.
But the point you're missing is that these hearings, many of these hearings are held in private, which means you guys never get to know. OK, so let's just ask...
I agree with that.
Let me ask you two girls
agree with
here.
that.
So you're going to have a checkup for you're going to have a smear test, or you're going to have your breast checked. Wouldn't it be good for you to know if that doctor had been up on the charge of sexual misconduct? But wouldn't you want to know that? But with these secret hearings, you're never going to know that, because they're going to be disciplined with a warning.
I don't want to know the ins and outs of people's accusations. What I want to know is the outcome. So if someone's been accused of something as a disciplinary, in my eyes, that should be held in private whilst the facts are ascertained, output is decided, and then if that person is concluded guilty of something, misconduct, wrongdoing, whatever, then of course I want that transparency as a user of the service. But if you get falsely accused of something, for example, and I'm not talking about this case, I'm talking generally.
Every day, Michelle.
But I'm not talking about court. I'm talking about disciplinaries in private.
This is the point. It's not. Is it fair? I mean, I've employed a lot of people over time. I've had people take us to industrial tribunals. A lot of the time they were deeply unfair, yet all the publicity was about their case as opposed to about your defence, by and large. And your sort of belief that everything should be held in public because that's the only way you get accountability. I just don't think it's true.
If one of you guys mistakenly hit someone with a car tomorrow, it was an accident, you made a mistake, you hit someone with a car tragically, you would have your backside dragged into court before you knew what had happened, as you rightly should, until the facts are looked at, until it's decided whether or not you're guilty. And that's what doctors should face that too.
I think the difference between running into someone with your car is that when you sign up to being a doctor, which is a difficult thing to do, that requires, you could earn more money doing something else in most cases. Many people do it because they're passionate about it as a vocation. Yes. One of the things you're signing up to is that you will be in life and death situations daily, possibly, and that people's lives will be in your hands. Now, everybody makes mistakes. I'm not excusing this doctor. No, you said that it wasn't a mistake. It was a mistake. She made a decision.
She made a decision.
She
not
made
to
a
see
mistake.
A sick child.
I'm sure if you asked that doctor, do you think that was the right decision now, she'd say it wasn't. Nobody wants a child to die on their hands, Carole.
This doctor has never apologised. So we have this set of parents 2 years down the line who are devastated, and this doctor has still not apologised. So if she was sorry and she had made a mistake, she should have said so.